are going to break protocol and not take a break now. We're going to go ahead with our first speaker. I would like to introduce one of our largest contributors. I don't mean that financially. I mean that height-wise. Turns out, of course, I get kidded about everybody's my cousin, because John here and Tony Griffin are cousins or whatever. But this is actually one of my wife's cousins, Forrest Daws from Waynesboro, Mississippi, or we should say Mississippi. He is also serving. Are you First Lieutenant Commander at the division now? And more importantly, he is our historian-in-chief for the SCV, importantly as far as what we're doing today. He is going to talk. Our title for this event was Who We Are as an Organization and as a People. The morning will be organizational history. I warn you now, not all of it's pretty. Okay? Kind of like our membership. We wouldn't want our men to be pretty, would we? Though we do have some. So Forrest is going to talk mostly about the early years of the SCV. Later, we'll have Commander Sullivan talking about the more recent history, and then I think what everybody came for is to hear Ben Sewell talk about behind the curtain at Elm Springs. So if y'all would welcome our historian-in-chief to talk about the early history of the SCV, compatriot Forrest Daws.
All right, well, good morning, now that that's out of the way. They say you're not supposed to begin a speech by making an apology or an excuse, so I'm going to go ahead and start with both. First of all, this topic is and will be for a while a work in progress. I want to get it right, and that's going to take time. The saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, I'm trying this one bite at a time. Unfortunately, my work has been derailed for the last couple of months. Just to give you a little bit of background, I had a few family issues, specifically my parents' health. My dad, for those of you that don't know me, and some of you do, most of you don't, my dad's was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 25 years ago, but it's in the advanced stages. He has almost complete paralysis now. And my mother, who has always been very healthy, recently had some health issues. So between being part-time caretaker and work, I haven't been able to get as much information as I wanted for today, but I'm going to give you what I've got. I've also been battling some respiratory issues. Doc says lingering effects of COVID. I'm not real sure about that, but if y'all will bear with me, I'm going to do the best that I can. I want to thank each of you for coming today and for the opportunity to address you all. When I looked at the speakers list for the first time, I will freely admit I was a little intimidated. Some big names on the list, and I am not one of them. Luckily, in his infinite wisdom, past Commander-in-Chief Chuck McMichael put me at the first, so I do not have to follow any of these great speakers. So there is that. Let me give you a little bit about my background, both on myself and this topic and how it came about. First on myself, so I've been in the SCV for almost 24 years, but there was a time I didn't even know this organization existed. It's Christmas, 1999, standing in the front yard of my great-grandmother's house talking with my cousin. And so, I took the long way around the barn with my education. And in 1999, I just revived my basketball career at Ole Miss. And I was telling him how angry I was at the Confederate cleansing that was beginning to take place at our beloved flagship university. And he told me, you should join the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I looked at him, I said, what's the Sons of Confederate Veterans? I had no idea. Now, it's important to point out that I come from a family that has a love and appreciation of history. We took vacations to Disney World, Six Flags, that type thing, but more often than not, we went to battlefields, we went to museums. My father flew a battle flag. Family was very important to us, yet I knew nothing about the SCV. Thankfully, that same cousin that suggested I join was the newly elected commander of the local camp. Spring break, I came home, I went to my first meeting. Camp voted to take me in, and then on May 4th, 2000, my certificate was issued, and I officially became a member of the SCV. Now, since then, I have spent countless hours, as I know most all of you have, working for this organization. However, I don't know that I've ever been as humbled as when our current commander-in-chief called and asked me if I would be willing to serve as historian-in-chief. Now, the day he asked me, I immediately went to the website. I pulled up our Constitution, standing orders. I start reading, okay, what does the historian-in-chief do? What's my job description? If you haven't looked at it, it's pretty brief. So I called Commander Boshears back. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to get it right. I don't mean this directed at anyone specific, but I think all of you will admit we have, unfortunately, some members who are seeking the title and not the job. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to stick my chest out and say I'm this or that. I wanted to do the job. I wanted to do something that would make a difference, and I wanted to do something that would contribute to this organization that I love so much. Well, then I got another phone call, this time from a past commander-in-chief. Commander McMichael called me one evening. I was at Walmart. It's funny the things that you remember. And he said, I have a project for you, Mr. Historian-in-Chief. Well, I said, well, Commander, I'll be honored to do the best I can. What do you got? And he said, all these years, no one has put together and compiled a history of the SCV. I absolutely love the idea. I'd actually been thinking about something along those lines in a roundabout way. You see, last year, my camp celebrated its 30th anniversary. And I thought, what better way to celebrate our 30th anniversary of our rechartering than to compile a camp history? And I realized that camp existed 7 years before I even got involved. And there were a whole host of things that I didn't know had taken place. And that got me naturally to thinking, what all was taking place in the SCV before I got in? And so I began to spend a great deal of time and effort researching. And you see, we've all spent a great deal of time researching, documenting, preserving our ancestors' history, and rightfully so. But unfortunately, we haven't done a very good job of researching and documenting and preserving our own history. And let me tell you, we, the SCV, have accomplished some pretty wonderful things. Ronald Reagan once said, freedom is a fragile thing and is never more than a generation away from extinction. I happen to share that same sentiment about our history. When I was a child, my father worked a lot. Don't get me wrong, he was a good father, a good dad. He took me hunting, he came to my ball games, he was home pretty much every night. I was blessed. But he did work hard and he worked a lot. And as such, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. And my grandfather really became more like a second father to me. And I can remember he used to tell me the same stories over and over. And I would quietly turn my head and roll my eyes and think, Papa, you've already told me that. Papa's gone now. And I sure am glad he told me those stories. But you see, the problem is, if I don't tell those stories to my son, now they're lost forever. They die with me. And what he did is now in vain. To me, it's up to me to pass those stories down. And so for us as members of the SCV, it's the same way. It's up to us to tell that next generation who we are and where we came from. Well, you can't talk about the SCV, at least in my opinion, without first talking about the UCV. There were actually multiple Confederate veterans groups that began forming soon after the war was over. But the UCV would become the organization. A Baton Rouge druggist, Leon Jastrzemski, visited a reunion of the Grand Army of the Republic, and he had an idea to form a similar organization for Confederate veterans. Now, about that same time, J.F. Shipp, a Chattanooga businessman, was working to create the first national military park at Chickamauga. These men invited some former Confederate cavalrymen to a reunion and fundraiser held in New Orleans on February 13, 1888. Former cavalrymen from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee attended the reunion, and they had such a good time that they immediately made plans to hold a larger reunion the following year. And so, 52 delegates that represented 9 different veterans organizations met in New Orleans that next year. On June 10, 1889, they formed the United Confederate Veterans. The delegates unanimously selected General John B. Gordon of Georgia as their commander-in-chief. Their constitution defined the organization's purposes as, quote, strictly social, literary, historical, and benevolent. After his first few years, Commander Gordon would attempt to step down. There was such an uprising from the members, chants of no, that the commander agreed to stay on, and he would hold that office until his death in 1904. Over 150,000 Confederate veterans would join the UCV, and the total number of camps would explode to 1,850 at the organization's height. Now, it's important to note that in addition to the annual reunions that the UCV would hold, there was another major contributing factor that would greatly contribute to the organization gaining popularity. One man would be responsible for producing that factor, or should I say, publishing that factor. Sumner Archibald Cunningham would found and help begin publishing the Confederate Veteran magazine in Nashville, Tennessee, in January of 1893. Now, originally it was more of a newsletter, and the purpose was to raise funds for a monument to President Jefferson Davis. Obviously, the first issue contained several articles on President Davis written by Cunningham himself. There was also a poem entitled The Conquered Banner, which was written by Father Abram Ryan. The first issue was so popular and well-liked that the UCV would adopt it the following year. What began as a fundraising newsletter would grow into a high-quality magazine, and Mr. Cunningham would personally edit the magazine for 21 years. Many veterans would author stories from their experiences for publications in the Veteran, adding to its authenticity and contributing to preserving history at the same time. Upon Mr. Cunningham's death, he would leave most of his estate to ensuring that the magazine continued, and continue it would. Miss Edith Pope, Mr. Cunningham's secretary, would take over as publisher after his death in 1913, and she would successfully run the magazine until 1932, when the country's financial woes would catch up to it. The Confederate Veteran enjoyed a wide circulation, as many copies would make their way to multiple readers through sharing. The impact Mr. Cunningham, Miss Pope, and the Veteran had on the UCV and the SCV cannot and should not be overstated. Now, speaking of the SCV, the Sons would get their start while the UCV was still very much active. In an effort to honor their fathers, many Sons began to come to meetings and attend reunions as well. Now, the UCV would continue on until the death of its last member caused the organization to formally dissolve on May 30th, 1952. However, the Sons would formally organize in July of 1896. This time, I want to read the report of the organization of the General Confederation, Sons of Confederate Veterans, which appeared in an August issue, 1896 Confederate Veteran magazine. The formation at Richmond last week of the Federation to be known as the United Sons of Confederate Veterans should receive the commendation and support from all true Southerners. Its aims, objects, and purposes are not to create or foster in any manner any feeling against the North, but to hand down to posterity the story of the glory of the men who wore the gray. Knowing that in union there is strength, the sons of those who made the South famous have come together for the systematic and united work of preserving from oblivion the true history of the South. That this step meets with the hearty approval of the men who wore the gray is shown by the following resolution, which was adopted at the convention of the United Confederate Veterans at Richmond at their regular session. Quote, resolved that this session provide at once for the formation of Sons of Confederate Veterans into a separate national organization. This is urgent from the manifold fact that our ranks are thinning daily, and our loved representatives should step in now and arrange to take charge of Southern history, our relics, mementos, and monuments, and stimulate the erection of other monuments to our heroes and taps sounded for the last of their fathers, unquote. But before this resolution was adopted, the Sons had taken matters into their own hands, and on the evening of June 30th met in the auditorium at Richmond and arranged for the organization of a federation themselves. At this meeting, a committee was appointed to draft a constitution for the new association, but they were unable to prepare that same evening, and the session adjourned at 11 o'clock to meet the next day. On July 1st, the delegates from the camp of Sons of Confederate Veterans from the various southern states who had been called by the R.E. Lee camp of Richmond to assemble for the purpose of forming this association adopted a constitution governing the United Confederate Veterans and permanently organizing the United Sons of Confederate Veterans. The preamble of this Constitution reads, "To encourage the preservation of history, perpetuate the hallowed memories of brave men, to assist in the observance of Memorial Day, to aid and support all Confederate veterans, widows, and orphans, and to perpetuate the record of the services of every Southern soldier. These are our common aims. These objects, we believe, will both promote a pure and better private life and enhance our desire to maintain the national honor, union, and independence of our common country." The organization of this association is composed of departments, divisions, brigades, and camps. The Federation has an executive head and 3 departments, entitled the Army of Northern Virginia Department, consisting of the states of North and South Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, and Kentucky; the Army of Tennessee Department, consisting of the states of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida; the Trans-Mississippi Department, consisting of the states and territories west of the Mississippi, excepting Louisiana. Each state constitutes a division and is commanded by a major general. The departments are commanded by a lieutenant general. The states are furthermore divided into brigades, which also have their commanders. In this way, the work is thoroughly systematized and is so arranged that the most excellent results can be readily obtained. The officers elected at this first convention of the United Sons of Confederate Veterans: Mr. Jeb Stuart, Jr. of Richmond, General Commanding; Mr. Robert Smith of Charleston, Lieutenant General in command of the Department of Northern Virginia; Mr. John Hardman of Macon, Georgia, Lieutenant General in command of the Department of Tennessee. The election of Lieutenant General of Trans-Mississippi Department was deferred until the organization of state divisions in that department. Mr. Pinckney of Charleston, Quartermaster General; Mr. Williamson of Columbia, Tennessee, Inspector General; Dr. McGuire of Richmond, Surgeon General; Mr. McKenzie of Asheville, North Carolina, Commissary General; Bishop Gaylor of Tennessee, Grand Chaplain; and Mr. Cobb of Atlanta, Georgia, Judge Advocate General. The officers of this new association are exerting every effort to thoroughly organize and build up the same, and to this end their efforts will be directed to the formation of camps of the Sons in every city and town across the South. According to the Constitution of the Convention of the United Sons of Confederate Veterans, is held at the same time and place as the United Confederate Veterans, so that the next convention will meet in Nashville, Tennessee. The General Commanding has the power to appoint a staff to aid him in his work, as have also the Lieutenant Generals and the commanders of divisions. General Jeb Stuart has appointed Mr. Edwin P. Cox of Richmond, Virginia, as Adjutant General and Chief of Staff. The remainder of his staff has yet to be appointed. The Lieutenant Generals have not yet appointed their staff. Now, I want to go back and I want to say something that I have felt was key to what the Sons were trying to do there. And on that July 1st, 1896, the Committee on Constitution and Bylaws reported, and Mr. Hardman, the chair, stated that they could do no better than to respect the biblical injunction, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be long in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." This being so, they decided to submit the laws of the United Confederate Veterans with only such changes as were absolutely necessary. Again, to me, you can't talk about the history of the SCV without first talking about the history of the veterans themselves and the UCV. That's why we're here. Another milestone would occur in 1906, one I know every SCV member is well aware of. After the death of Commander Gordon in 1904, the man this very event is named after, Stephen D. Lee, would become commander of the UCV. If numbers were already dwindling in 1896, you can imagine what was happening by 1906. With that in mind, as each passing generation tends to do, Commander Lee decided he needed to offer some guidance, some direction. He wanted to convey to the sons just what they would need to do. And so on April 25th, 1906, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Lieutenant General Stephen D. Lee, commander of the United Confederate Veterans, issued what we in the SCV know and refer to as the charge. To you, Sons of Confederate Veterans, we will commit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which you love also, and those ideals which made him glorious and which you also cherish. I'm going to have to pause for a minute because after 24 years of hearing that and saying that over and over, to stand here before you all at the event named after that man and repeat those words, I still get a chill. It means something to me. I think it means something to all of us. And with those words, Lee gave the SCV their mission and shaped the future of the organization for generations to come. A couple of other noteworthy things. In 1912, at the reunion held in Macon, Georgia, the name United Sons of Confederate Veterans was changed to simply Sons of Confederate Veterans, as we have and know today. Another change would occur in 1914 at the Jacksonville Convention. Up until that point, staff of the Commander-in-Chief bore the suffix General, such as Adjutant General, etc. At the 1914 reunion, an amendment was passed, made to replace the word General with In-Chief, and provided that the word General was not to be prefixed to any official designation. The SCV would continue to evolve and grow over the next several years, but like so many other organizations, 2 world wars and difficult economic times would take their toll in the early and mid-1900s. Thankfully, in 1953, another member would step up and revitalize the organization. Dr. W.D. McCain would become Adjutant-in-Chief that year and immediately begin to take action. He moved the headquarters to his home state of Mississippi, where, and some of you correct me if I'm wrong, it would stay until we got our current headquarters. He began to actively recruit and collect funds. At the time he took office, the treasury of the organization was basically empty, and the future of the Sons was in question. But over the course of the next 40 years, Dr. McCain would help grow the Sons by over 6,000 members, increase our funds to provide solid financial footing, provide steady leadership and guidance, and help give us the Sons of Confederate Veterans that we know and love today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more. The Sons of Confederate Veterans has a long and proud history, and I look forward to continuing to research and document that history so that the future generations will know just who we are and where we came from. Speaking for myself, I will forever be grateful and thankful for those that came before me, and I can't wait to see what's next for this organization. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to continuing to document the history of this proud organization. Thank you.
There's a little bit left on this time card. So did anybody, we'll have a question session, but a couple of things. One, talking, okay.
I didn't touch it.
You broke it. You broke it. One of the things I wanted to mention, you touched on the charge, and thanks for You know, every camp has somebody that has it memory. Okay, you do the charge for us this time. And every time they come to me, I say, I don't know it. And they say, well, why don't you know it? Well, I have a different perspective. I have on purpose not committed the charge to my memory. As many times as we say it, I refuse to memorize it. And here's why. Because every time I want to have to read the words again, I don't want the words to become rote and meaningless. I want to read them just like I'm hearing them for the first time. Now, it's good to have people that know it off the top of their head, for those of us that don't. But think about that. So if you haven't done it in a while, sit down and read the charge a line at a time and contemplate each of those lines as a standalone, what it means to vindicate, what it means to cherish, what were their ideals. You know, what is it? This is the 120th anniversary of the Louisiana Division this year. And we're having an event in Mansfield on April 6th. Commemorate that. There's a look all over Facebook. Or JC will be glad to tell you about it. If we have some time, I can do a commercial if you want. So yeah, we have a lot more history that can be done, especially your own camp. If your camp doesn't have a history, get somebody in your camp to write that up, and I would imagine we can start collecting those at headquarters.
Yes, and since you said that, that will lead me into something that I've been trying to do now for the last few months. I'm requesting at least every division, but preferably every camp. Now, I understand most camps are not, I say most camps, hopefully most will, but I understand that we've got some camps that they're not going to respond, they're not going to send anything in, but take a moment, even if it's brief, even if it's just a page or two, and compose a history of your camp. I'm willing to bet that all of you are a member of a camp that has done something pretty significant over the course of its life. But as I've said, if we don't pass that down to that next generation, I didn't realize in that small 7-year span between my camp's rechartering and me joining, multiple events happened. In the late 1990s, the Jefferson Davis Presidential Library was built and dedicated at Beauvoir right there in the Mississippi Division. Now, I was there for the second library after Katrina wiped the first one off the map. But I
was there for the first one.
But so many things happen that, again, if we don't, I'm excited to hear some of these other speakers because there are things that happened either before I got in or right after I got in and I was still kind of getting my feet wet. And we need to document those things. And so I'm simply asking that anyone that has something, whether it be division level or camp level, jot that down, type that up, send it to me. I want to have it on file up here at headquarters. Eric's been very good helping me out. We've been trying to scan some paper documents and digitize things that are already on record, but just a nice summary of your camp or your division, brigade, whatever, even just an event that took place. I was in Louisiana last year for the rededication of the Cato Parish Monument. That was a monumental event. It was very well attended. No pun intended. But again, in 50 years, if we don't tell that next generation, how are they going to know what happened and how that came about? So that's really what we're trying to do here, and I would appreciate that. If you don't have my contact information, get with me after this. Be happy to provide it to you. And just like I say, shoot me an email. I've already had several divisions respond. Alabama, anybody Alabama in here? Had some Alabama did a very good job. Commander Hill has got a 3-volume set of the Alabama division history. I'd love to see every division do something like that. We're working on it in Mississippi, but I challenge each division to put something down, and let's get that documented and digitized and have it here at headquarters so that members down the road, years down the road, can come up and pull that history up and see just who we are and where we came from. So I would appreciate your help on that.
Thank you, Forrest.
Thank you.